Hey everyone, it's Excelblum. Today, I'll be going over a bunch of old polls that I did back when I first started YouTube. Back then, I was very curious about a lot of things in the Fire Emblem community. Like how many people have played this game, how many people like this game, that kind of thing. How do people play? Yeah, and we can first start with people's favorite older Fire Emblem title. And it seems like, yeah, it's most people really do like Fire Emblem 8, Fire Emblem 7, and Fire Emblem 4. As for people's favorite newer Fire Emblem titles, I would say that people really like Awakening, they like Three Houses, they like Radiant Dawn and Path of Radiance. But they really don't like Fates and 11 and 12. And 11 and 12 I can understand because most people haven't played Fire Emblem 11 and Fire Emblem 12. But Fates, I can understand why it's so low on this chart, even though a lot of people have played it. And it's probably because of its numerous story issues, I think. Next, most people's first Fire Emblem game was either Awakening or Fates or 6, 7, and 8. And that's kind of interesting. It makes a lot of sense though, because like Awakening and Fates is most people's first entry to the series. And 6, 7, and 8 are very easily accessible, and they also look great, even for like games of their era. Most people who play Fire Emblem get into it by playing Fire Emblem game, but around 10% get into it because of heroes, and a surprising 23% actually get into Fire Emblem because of Super Smash Bros. And I thought that was a joke back when I first saw this, but it's actually true. People actually do get into this game because of Smash. Most people who play Fire Emblem games also generally only play like a handful of them. Most people don't play every title. I haven't played every title. A lot of the earlier titles don't really count, I would say. Like Fire Emblem 1, 2, and 3 are just basically bad games these days compared to the remakes or any of the later titles. So it kind of makes sense why people wouldn't go back to revisit the older ones. Most people who engage in the Fire Emblem community do seem to be actively playing a Fire Emblem game, at least to some degree. There are some people who stumble onto Fire Emblem YouTube after not having played for years, but those are a minority. I'm sure there are a lot of people who are convinced to get back into Fire Emblem because of YouTube, but I don't really have numbers for that, so what can you do? And the main preferred difficulty of most Fire Emblem players is either normal or hard. Most people tend not to like the highest difficulty option, and that's fairly understandable. Lunatic difficulties are generally pretty challenging unless you've played the game before, you're using guides, or you're just masochistic, or you want to make content out of it, like me. or all of the above. And ROM hacks. ROM hacks are actually, I've always thought ROM hacks are a very niche part of the community, but I think at least in the YouTube sphere of Fire Emblem players, a lot of people actually do either play or watch them. But honestly, it's still a fairly minor part of the community. I think most people would prefer to play an actual Fire Emblem game over a ROM hack, and that's my personal perspective on it. I still haven't really explored all the games in detail enough for me to really want to do ROM hacks on the channel at the moment. Next question is what are people's favorite things about Fire Emblem? And it does seem like it is the characters and the gameplay for the most part. The story is actually a lot lesser than I thought it would be, but I think it makes sense because the strength of Fire Emblem is in its characters. People are fans of specific characters. People use their specific characters in the game. There's a great like gameplay story integration there, a little narrative, so to speak. But the story of Fire Emblem is generally widely criticized. A lot of the Fire Emblem plots are either kind of generally not super well received. The story is more of a vehicle to sell the characters. The overarching narrative, I think, in Fire Emblem has never been that much of the draw. It's mostly the characters and the gameplay. Notable is that most people don't like. There's barely anyone who likes Fire Emblem for its community, and that's extremely justified, right? Alright, here's a question about support conversations, and it seems like most people don't have people just read what they get, and a bit more will grind to see more. And surprisingly, not that many people will look up support conversations online. I thought that was how most people did it. I thought they would just read it on GameFAQs instead of playing the game to see it. I guess, especially in later games, it's grinding to see supports is not as much of a problem, or is not a problem, or not as difficult as the older games, which is probably skews in my perspective. Because I'm just imagining Fire Emblem 8, right, where you can't you cannot reasonably see every support conversation in any one playthrough. Next up is a question about infinite reinforcements, and I think you either hate them because they're annoying, or you like them because of the material benefits for the most part. It's a very case-by-case basis. Most of the time it's not very good. Next up is Let's Plays. Actually, this was me trying to scout out some this is how people in the community feel about Let's Plays. And I guess I'm not sure how things have changed now, but it seems like most people who watch Fire Emblem Let's Plays do watch over the host personalities, right? This was kind of me like scouting out. This is before I did any streams, before I'd made any actual like voiced content. Back like 9 months ago, I was actually just making edits for the most part. Also only making all the funny edits, I guess. And here's a question about Jagan characters. And yeah, it seems like most people just... The prevailing opinion is that people just use Jagans when they're useful. For the most part. There's kind of a distribution. Some people aren't even aware of the Jagan lingo. Next thing is that people do replay Fire Emblem games. I would say that most people who do replay them just do it to see different routes. But I guess this is kind of specific to Fire Emblem Fates and Fire Emblem Three Houses, because those are the only ones that truly have significant route splits that change the entire game, right? It's like Awakening doesn't really have route splits. Fire Emblem 8 kind of has one, but it's not very long. Here's a question about turtling, and it seems like most people will turtle, right? Around like 94% of people will turtle to some degree, as long as they can, right? Or at least they will admit to it. 94% of people admit to turtling. Most people don't really go that fast, and that kind of makes sense. On your first playthrough, you don't really have the game knowledge necessary to really go fast in any capacity. So yeah, I guess my main conclusion from this is that efficiency really is not a metric that most people care about in any way. Most people don't care about going fast. They just play to beat the game or play to train their characters. Oh, here's a question about when people first started playing Fire Emblem. Half the people started in the Awakening Fates era, and the other half in the SOV Three Houses era, I guess. Here's a question about permadeath and resets, and yeah, it seems like it is in fact true that most people will reset after every death. Though I kind of wonder if exposure to my YouTube content over the past year has changed the percentage points somewhat, because I've seen some people in comment sections say that they've changed how they play based on my tactics, which involve high amounts of sacrifice and grinding. It seems like around 84% of people will grind to some degree-ish in Fire Emblem. That kind of makes sense, right? It's the fundamental part of most Fire Emblem titles to grind. Next up is oh, there's my 5,000 subs. Tier lists and guides. Around half to 2/3 of people will use guides to some degree. Around a third won't use them at all. I think it's mostly just most people use them to access content. I don't really think. Personally, I do look up guides and discussions for when I'm first playing a game to get a gauge of what like to do. I guess a gauge of what's good. But I'm definitely a more research inclined player than most people, I imagine. Well, here's a question about favoritism based on personalities, right? It seems like, yeah, most people will play with their favorites, but to some degree, but it kind of really depends on if the character's good, right? I think a lot of people's favorite characters, it's either their favorite because they're good, or oftentimes their favorite in spite of them being really bad. I don't know how to describe it. Oh yeah, and here's me asking if what people want to watch, and it seems like most people do want to watch some kind of challenge run, some kind of Iron Man, over like a regular playthrough, or just like editing streams. I've been considering trying to do that at some point, but I kind of wonder how entertaining it would be to see me like edit a 1-minute video for 2 hours, because that's around how long it takes, and not all of it is very glamorous. Here's a question about which era of Fire Emblem games is the most popular. I would say, yeah, it seems like most people do like the GBA games. Even the GBA games are very popular, even those not people's first games, and so are the 3DS games. I think that kind of makes a lot of sense, because the 3DS games are pretty good, and so are the GBA games. They're good for their era, right? The GameCube and DS games are really not that popular game-wise. Three Houses is in its own tier, I guess. There's a lot of like bunching and grouping eras here, because people have their own specific favorite game. That, I guess, that is the main factor behind which era is their favorite. But we'll explore more into this in the later polls. The people's favorite Fire Emblem setting is actually Telia somehow. Even though Fire Emblem 9 and 10 are really not very popular games, the Tellius continent, the Tellius setting is in fact people's favorite setting. And that's kind of surprising, I would say, because it's a bit odd that like people like the setting but not the game, right? You would think that the two are inherently tied, but I guess with the you don't really need to play the game to know the story. And with Fire Emblem Heroes and other associated things, it makes sense that it's very easy to explore each individual setting without really engaging that much with the game itself. Oh, here's a question about elitism, and it seems like 7% of people admit to being elitist, 6% have positive experiences about elitists, and 44% don't really care. Around 20%, 21% have negative experiences, and 23% have never encountered one at all. You would often see people complaining about elitists, but you might never see one ever, right? And I think this might be a symptom of people making up people to be mad at, right? Maybe this was a lot worse way back in the day. It probably depends on which circles you frequent. But honestly, I don't really think it's a thing. And I think the numbers here might back that up. Only 20% of the community have had a negative experience. And the people who voted on this poll are, I guess, part of the more hardcore community. Oh, here's a question about people's investment in the Fire Emblem community. And yeah, it seems like of the people who view content, only around 10% actually really engage with it. That makes a lot of sense here, and we see that mirrored here. Most people might lurk, most people might look into things, but most people don't post anything. And that's just generally true. I asked a follow-up question about how involved people are in the Fire Emblem community. Yeah, it makes sense. Most people just lurk. Like, some people will just discuss it sporadically for the most part. Next one up is how many people in real life you know who play Fire Emblem? Personally, I don't know that many. But yeah, for the most part, I basically don't know anyone who basically knows Fire Emblem, and that seems mirrored. That seems mirrored across here. I would say that like Fire Emblem community is mostly an online phenomenon. The number of people who really like this series, I guess, who like it enough to be engaged in a Fire Emblem community is actually fairly low. One thing I think that is typically the case is that a person's first Fire Emblem game is generally their favorite one, but actually that's not necessarily the case. Only around 38% of people, the first game they completed is their favorite game, and around 50% of people say differently. And I guess it kind of makes sense, especially because one of the big entry points in the series is Awakening and Fates and Three Houses, all of which the community has kind of soured significantly on since then. Oh, here's a question about avatars. Most people's favorite avatar is Robin from Fire Emblem Awakening. Robin is a much less offensive character to some people, I think, than later characters. I don't know. I'm not sure where I'm going with this. But yeah, this was right around when I first started streaming Fire Emblem. I think I streamed to like 40 viewers. And the next thing is that people really hate Corrin. I would say that's extremely justified. I think, having played Fire Emblem Fates for the better part of the last couple of months, Fire Emblem Fates' story is pretty bad, and Corrin is a pretty big part of that. Oh, here's a question about promoting early, and it seems like most people, 55%, will promote at level 20, as they should. Personally, I think that the benefits of promoting early are not generally worth it. The benefits are fairly minimal for the temporary boost you get, and the character is basically unusable long term. Oh, here's a question about moral quandaries. Yeah, it seems like most people try to be the goody two shoes or play for completionism. That's very sensible. Most people don't actively try to be a bad guy. I think this is a thing with a lot of with games with actual moral systems, unlike Fire Emblem, which is actually mostly fake moral choices, except for like the part where you can kill Sheriff for his boots or leave him alive. Most people is generally the case, and most people roleplay as the good guy. Oh, and now I think we go to a bunch of polls that ask if you have played the games. And yeah, we can see Fire Emblem 11 is a surprising number of people have played some part of Fire Emblem 11. At least 7,000 people here, right? And same thing for Fire Emblem 12. Fire Emblem 12 is a lot less popular than Fire Emblem 11. Maybe like 60% of people. Actually, a lot less, because even fewer people have voted on this poll. That's a problem with this. Yeah, that Fire Emblem 11 is not very popular, and 12 even less so because it's not translated to English. Yeah, it's not officially translated to English. Oh, here's as for Awakening is really popular. Around 80% of people have played some Awakening. Around 75% have played some of Fates. Around 70% have played some of Shadows of Valentia. And around 80 something have played Three Houses. And then the earlier games are obviously much less popular, right? Fire Emblem 1 is very not popular. Same with Fire Emblem 2, Gaiden, Fire Emblem 3. They're basically not worth mentioning in terms of the amount of people who have played them. And Genealogy, actually, a lot of people have played Genealogy, though it seems like less than Shadow Dragon, actually. But people really don't like 3CS776. Even less people have played it than Genealogy. Fire Emblem 5 might be like, aside from the really older games, might be the least popular mainline game that doesn't have a remake. Oh, here's one of Fire Emblem 6. A lot of people play Fire Emblem 6, like 67%. That's pretty considerable. And around 80% for Fire Emblem 7. Around the same for Sacred Stones. And Path of Radiance is actually quite popular in terms of people who have played and finished the game. Which is a bit surprising. Radiant Dawn is a bit less popular, but still pretty considerable. And from Heroes, most people in this community, at least half, play some Fire Emblem Heroes like right now. Another half doesn't really play it, it seems. It's a bit split. And Warriors, actually, I think more people have played Fire Emblem Warriors than people who have played 3CS776. So, that's a bit sad. And Fire Emblem 5 isn't for everyone. And honestly, I personally soured a bit on it. Oh, here's Token Rush Sessions. And okay, I guess there's a game people haven't played. That's good. And like, yeah, it makes sense. Token Rush Sessions is not really a Fire Emblem game, despite what people might say. Like, it has a title, but it's an RPG. It's not a strategy RPG. Next up is Tearing Saga, and oh boy, people really haven't heard of this game. This is one of the games by Shoujo Kaga after he left Intelligent Systems after 376, and it kind of follows in his game design philosophy, which is of one of the least popular games in the franchise. I haven't played it personally, actually, and the same thing for Berwick Saga, which is his follow-up. It's even less popular than Tearing Saga. I guess it helps that until very recently, like maybe like a year ago, there wasn't even like proper translation for it. But next there's Visteria Saga, which is like Shoujo Kaga's like game released in like a few years ago in SRPG Maker. And yeah, I've played it. I personally enjoy it, but it's also very not popular, not really heard of. There's a Visteria Saga 2 is being translated pretty soon, so I'm actually looking forward to that. Next up is here's a question about people playing on emulator, and most people play on the original hardware, though like it's kind of split. I guess it kind of depends on the game, right? Especially like older titles, they're a lot harder to like find at reasonable prices. Like Path of Radiance and Radiant Dawn are famously comically expensive for what they're worth. So yeah, I imagine those games are much more commonly emulated, or just have not played. And I think at this point, I kind of stopped doing polls and just start making memes. Here's the part where I finished my Fire Emblem 11 stream. That's nice, actually. Start of an era, I guess. Here's an Orson joke. Here's my Fire Emblem 11 Shadow Dragon Heart 5 speed run, which I did with only generics as an Iron Man. Took like 6 hours. I might do this again at some point, I think. This was really fun when I did it, actually. And the poll. Oh, randomizer. It seems like, yeah, most people don't play randomizers. Yeah, I'm personally, about my opinion on randomizers, I'm not too sure if I want to do one, because for the most part, I haven't really deeply explored all the Fire Emblem games I want to yet. And also, randomizers, you can't really do any kind of deep dive because your experience there is much different for everyone else's. There's no like resources you can access about strategies you can do with your randomized characters. It's all off the cuff. There's no previous knowledge to build on. Thanks for watching, everyone. If any of these polls about how people play the game, which games people have played surprise you or was interesting, let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching. Remember to like and subscribe, and see you next time. Bye. Okay, hopefully this time I didn't fuck up the audio. Last time I had the reverb on for everything. It was awful.